Hello and welcome to the first Faces Friday in quite some time. My name is Jacob Hackett. Isabel Mosca is joining me for this interview this morning because we have a very special guest talking about a very important topic, funding for your local nonprofit organizations. You've all seen the news, DEI, RFK. I don't have to go into specifics. But, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome uh, Executive Director for the Atlantic Center for Independent Living, Donald Campbell.
Hi, Jacob and Isabel. Thank you for having me. And yeah, this is a very important topic. And I'll just get it started. So, my name is Donald. I'm the executive director of Atlantic Center for Independent Living. And we are a support and resource center for people with disabilities. We're in Atlantic County, but Centers for Independent Living exist all throughout the nation. There are 12 here in New Jersey, and they are funded by the federal government, and some also get state funds as well, depending on your center. And because of the turbulent times in the federal landscape, that has impacted funding for not only my nonprofit, but a lot of nonprofits. As many of you know, there's a lot of changes to Medicaid being discussed, and Medicaid brings not only is essential care for people with disabilities, but it fills in a lot of state budgets. New Jersey gets a lot of its money from Medicaid. So, with all these changes being discussed, and we're not here to endorse one way or the other, but states are worried about how they're going to have all their funding and balance their budgets. So when they do that, they start looking at programs like your local nonprofits or like Centers for Independent Living and looking to cut back on that funding. So that's where we are now. And in New Jersey, our budget is passed um, on June 30th. So right now, cells are working to educate lawmakers about the importance of Centers for Independent Living, and we're not the only nonprofit organization going through this. So that's why Jacob is right. The news is very important to follow.
So, and Donald, you talk about budgets. How many employees do you
So
have?
right now we have 8 employees, and if this funding cut goes through, we would lose about half. Um, and our full-time workers would be forced to go part-time. There, and just so in New Jersey, I know this podcast goes all over, but in New Jersey, Centers for Independent Living received $3 million for all 12 centers for independent living to be divided amongst us in what's called a state line item, and that's the line item that's been removed this year. So as of now, we don't have the funding. Now it could be put back in, and that's why we're working to educate lawmakers to put the funding back in. Because with budgets, it's not over till it's over. It's not over until it passes. So that's where we are. But it will be devastating to our community, our staff, and our programming, and anybody who cares about disability services, which represent 25% of the population, should care about this stuff because I always say, even if the funding goes away, our population is not going away. We're still going to need help and services. It's just going to end up with people not getting services. And I would make a very strong argument that the state would end up having to pay more because people are just going to need these community-based services like SILs um, in more expensive forms, which are institutions or hospitals, which are just more expensive. So I strongly believe that disability services like SILs are great investments because honestly, for the money that's put into them, you get a lot because it costs about a third to keep people in the community than it does to have them in institutions. And there's all this research that indicates that, but I constantly think we have to relearn that lesson. So,
Oh,
That's
yeah.
an excellent point. I was going to say, Donald, can you, for the listeners who do not know what a SIL is, explain it to them like a 5-year-old?
yeah, so that's a great point. So again, Centers for Independent Living exist nationwide, and they go back to a time of the civil rights movement. And I'll give you guys a movie recommendation if you want to learn about the independent living movement. There's a great movie on Netflix called Crip Camp, where they talk about the independent living movement. And independent living was this radical concept. It still is radical that people with disabilities should live in the community and that people with disabilities should gasp, make their own choices about their life. And that is where the basis of Centers for Independent Living came from. So Centers for Independent Living were these nonprofits, and they started in California under a guy named Ed Roberts, who had an iron lung, and he really pushed for people with disabilities to be independent after having polio. This was before the vaccine. And living his life, he really came to the conclusion that the only way to live life is in a way that would let him make his own choices. And there was other great advocates like Judith Heumann, who just passed away. She just had a book come out a couple of years ago that I would recommend everybody um, read. But Centers for Independent Living essentially provide services like applying for Social Security or connecting you to resources or helping you learn life skills like budgeting or banking or communication or I always say any service, big or small, that you can think of where if you need it to live in the community, we either provide or help you receive. And all centers for independent living look different depending on how long they've been around. Our center is still relatively new. We were established in 2016, which in the scheme of sales is actually very small. So our centers have been around 30, 40 years. And depending on how much funding they get or how many donations they get, they provide a lot of services. So if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I'm not in Atlantic County, Google your center. Google to say Center for Independent Living near me. Nobody lives at Centers for Independent Living. I know the name sounds like somebody should live there. If there's one thing I will say about Ed Roberts is he could have worked on the branding because everybody thinks somebody lives here, but they're resource centers at the end of the day. They're support centers at the end of the day. What we provide is support. Somebody calls us and they say, how do I get Medicaid? We're the people that help you get Medicaid. How do I get connected to Faces for Autism, which is a great organization? They help you if you can't get connected for whatever reason. We work with great organizations. So that's what Centers for Independent Living are, a resource and support center to
Oh,
keep people in the community.
wonderful, wonderful description. I know that a lot of people are wondering about how that progression came about. There are a lot of people now saying, gee, I never knew when I was a kid, there were no people with autism. We never saw adults.
Yeah, I don't know where they came from, Israel. They just pop. No, and we know there's a lot of myths that people think that, oh, autism just suddenly showed up. That's not true. I mean, what's happened is we've gotten better at diagnosing it, and we've also made a lot of progress in destigmatizing it. And although not enough, but we've seen more of it. And it's actually a good thing that we've seen people be more open with their diagnosis because and this is the mission, I think, of sales, I think of faces, where disability is just a normal human part of nature. Like it's just part of life. Like some people are disabled. If you live long enough, you're gonna join our club anyway. Neurodiversity in terms of autism, it's just a part of us. And all we're saying, again, I always say it's still a radical concept, but all we're saying is that these people to be given the supports and services they need to live in the community. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's all we're saying, and make their own choices. And so it's unfortunate that there's been a lot of traction with that myth recently. I've heard people say that. When I was growing up, there weren't nobody autistic. Well, there was. They just weren't, given the support and services they need to.
And they were probably institutionalized.
Yes, and they were probably if they were in the community at all, they weren't given the supports and they were probably institutionalized, which, is both immoral and terribly expensive. So it's terrible on all grounds. So the other thing I'll say that's unique about centers is We work with people of all ages throughout their whole lifespan. Also, Centers for Independent Living are run by and for people with disabilities. So 51% of our board and staff, you have to have a disability. You have to identify as having some sort of disability. It could be chronic pain, could be autism, could be I have cerebral palsy. So, it's really, and Isabel knows this, it's really important that people with disabilities play an essential role in all these organizations because it's about people with disabilities. And again, not that parents and caretakers don't have an essential role to play too, and often parents and caretakers also have disabilities as well. Um, but it needs to be disability led. And by disability, I mean all forms of disability. There is no ranking of what disability is more preferable. So those are the things we're constantly up against. And I would say, I don't know if you guys agree, we're constantly taking 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. We're constantly like, sometimes I'm like, oh, I feel really good about where we are. And then other days I'm like, I don't know if we've made any progress. And then I end up being somewhere in the middle. Like we've done some good things, but we still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, what Donald? What do they say? Our work is never done. Something to that. Once
No.
work is never done. There's a line like that. But
Yeah.
anyhow, I was a board member for the sale for from what 2009 20.
Yeah, I would say 2, 3 years. Correct. Yep.
I was on the board 20 2020 to 2023. And people, the sale just won't help you with Medicaid if you need anything, access link, your house redone.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, well, look in the resources for you. And like I say, I always like to use the caveat, depending on your sister, we're not going to come out and redo your house, but we would look in the Medicaid, see what research resources are there. And we would, and some centers, because you could be listening to this and be in New York and be like, well, my center does this. Well, that's different than a center in Oklahoma. It depends on what's going on in that environment and really what resources you have too. Because if you're in New York, you probably have more funding opportunities than somebody in Alaska, So it depends. But always know your Center for Independent Living. The other beautiful thing about Centers for Independent Living is I can work with anybody. I don't have to worry about, any conflicts. There are people that work with us in Faces. There are people that work with us in other organizations. So never think of your SIL is an added on to whatever resource you're already getting. It's never in contradiction of. And as Jacob said, we have a very low barrier of entry. You just have to identify as having a disability. Like you don't have to even have a diagnosis yet because a lot of the people we work with have disabilities, but maybe they haven't gone to the doctor and gotten a diagnosis or gone to Social Security and gotten a diagnosis. Because being able to do that is a skill set that you need help with a lot of times. Depending on how you grew up or what your family structure was like, you may not, you may have been autistic for a very long time and your school system never picked up on it, or your parents have never picked up on it. So by the time you get to us, you're like, I don't feel like I get enough support, and then we can help you. Uh,
And then I'm sure you have people who have comorbid diagnoses and
yes.
um, a dual diagnosis and what funding stream their money should come from, or if they're eligible for things. And those are important questions that sometimes people won't take the time to explain or may not know the full answers to. But hearing what you're saying, I mean, the SIL is able to help with helping people find resources or giving them the strength to take those next steps, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point because I think we all face this sometimes. Unfortunately, the system, like if you're autistic, you can only be autistic. If you have cerebral palsy, you better not have any other mental health things going on.
oh yeah, you better not have anything else wrong with you.
Yeah, yeah, it's still very siloed. But as Isabella said, you're a person, so you could have three disabilities. You could have, your mental health could go back and forth like everybody else, like everybody else. And centers are about taking a holistic approach at people. Like, we are not patronizing with people. We don't make decisions for you. We treat you like an adult. I always say, people come to us and say, what choice should I make? Should I take X job or this? And I lay out kind of the options. But I always say, it's your life at the end of the day. You have to make that choice. And sometimes I'll hear, well, what if it doesn't go well? And I say, that's part of life. That's part of, how many non-disabled people take jobs that don't go well? Like, it's still can be very frustrating to me how we talk about disability, you know, when people with disabilities make mistakes, or maybe they have more than one thing going on, it's treated like a five-alarm fire, like, oh my God, what's happening? But when you don't identify as having a disability, you can try as many jobs as you want or have as many struggles. It's just it's the scrutiny that is still placed on people with disabilities, and that's really the word that I was looking for. Scrutiny is just different. Like I'll go back to that again. I hear parents will come to me sometimes and say, what if my loved one fails at a job?" And I'm like, then they learn that that job is not right for them. Like everybody else, it's okay. We're allowed to make mistakes too. We're allowed to make the bad decision, whatever that is, or the unhealthy decision too. Because that's part of life. That's part of life. That's part of freedom.
or the thing I'm not getting with people, and Isabel, I'm sure you've experienced this over the years, working as a consultant as I have, um, with Deborah Freed and so on, is that parents thought, I uh, I thought my kid was going to sit on the couch and do nothing for the rest of his life after he left school. No.
Well, Isabel, talk about, because you know a lot about this. Talk about those challenges of transitioning with a disability, because it is. I mean, you could do a whole podcast about it. Is hard. I understand why parents find themselves. It's like falling off a cliff. Like, you can go from having all these services to what are we doing tomorrow?
And it's an excellent point, because both you and Jacob understand that when you're a caregiver, you're not the person. And what a lot of parents do not understand, caregivers, parents, it could be guardian, whoever it is, sibling, is that our mission is to prepare life so without us when we are no longer here.
Right.
So that this person can be independent in whatever supported way that they can. And it's a shocker for them. Like you said, that couch life sounds really, oh, good. The bus stop's coming. Well, it's kind of like what they used to talk about America. They were going to visit the New World, and the serpents were at the end. The world was flat and you fell off the cliff. And that's truly how we felt when my son graduated from school in 2020 in the middle of a pandemic.
Oh, so real subtle times, real
Yes,
subtle
several times. Let's put it that way. So ultimately, we did survive. It was a learning experience. We learned what to do and what not to do. My son is not a Zoomer, so taking an art class online was not going to be something that we did. You learn trial, sometimes baptism by fire. Sometimes you go somewhere and there's a behavior that's not desirable to the other people, and maybe they're not conducive to learning how to adapt. You learn what works. And sometimes it's frustrating, but at the same time, when you find your spot, your sweet spot for that person, and they're able to shine, it may only work 6 months. It may only work
Right.
a month. So it's just, as you said, I mean, if we have a slogan about this, it's just like everybody else. It's just like everybody else, like you just
Yes.
said. That's what it's all about, and it's constantly flowing and changing. The river, and we're into quotes today. Apparently, Jacob's talking about, a woman's work is never done. Well, I can say that we never step into the same river twice,
Right.
and you have to just be able to have people who will help you to adapt, and people you can throw things off of and say, "Hey, what if I tried this or that?" I know that Field of Dreams was very important to us, because when my son was younger, um, Little League by law had to include my son.
Right.
But I knew that we were not welcome.
Right.
I
Yeah.
knew no one wanted to adapt because I would
Yeah.
be training staff. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be there every minute of the day. I don't want to become one of the people in his team. So what we did instead is my daughter was a Girl Scout and my son became one of our, we'll call him a brownie. I don't know what he was,
Right.
but we called him a chocolate chip because they were brownies. So he was part of that team because he liked what they did. They ate and they made food, you know,
Right.
and then we made accommodations our way because I could be there and I could support my daughter and he could do things. So now that he's older and he likes to go to movies or he likes to do his day program, we found the right fit because the last one was much more independent. This one is, let's go on the train today and we're going to Hamilton and we're going to visit thrift shops and have pizza. Hey, I'm in. Well,
Right.
that's what my son likes to do. So somebody
Right.
else might not be happy with that. They might say, hey, wait a minute. This is ridiculous. I'd hate that. So the adaptation for somebody's life, maybe a year from now, my son's going to say, what was that all about? Why did we?
Why were you taking me on that train? Whatever.
But the beautiful thing that a lot of people don't know, and I know Jacob's mom understands this, is a lot of times this is respite for the parent, and they're not looking at it that way. They're looking at it as, I need to make this fit. I need to make this right. No, but you also need a life of your own. You need to go to work.
Right.
You
Yeah,
need to have interests outside of your loved one. And the Center for Independent Living, that's what this is about. We need to prepare people so that it's not a crushing reality. And I've seen this situation where a parent has passed on and that parent was their 24/7 caregiver.
correct.
And that's not the situation that you want for somebody. So
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Isabel. I think you're preaching to the choir. I mean, it's just so important to try things. And I think what I see when people have, you know, are less successful, it's that fear of just letting any of it go. And when I say let go, I'm not saying I want you just to be like, okay, kid, see ya. Like, I'm not saying you can't be involved. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying let some of it go. Like, I've been in meetings where I've seen where people are asked questions, or the person with the disability is asked questions, and they're the parent or whoever is not letting them answer. Let them answer it. Oh, he's struggling. All right, let him. It's
Well,
okay. It's all right. So
exactly,
it's okay.
and
It's okay.
and I've seen that with parents too.
It's okay. And I'm not saying you can't be there in the room. I'm not saying you can't help where needed. I'm just saying be willing to figure it out. Be willing to be a little uncomfortable sometimes, because that's in that uncomfortability is when you figure out what works for you. What works for you.
and there are families who have multiply disabled family members. And
Right.
they maybe at this point, I'm going to say they're experts in the field because they understand and each child is different and growing into adulthood. But there are situations where we've never navigated this before. We are not experts. No one gave us the roadmap. No one, people don't even know what roadmaps are anymore.
No one give us the GPS address or something.
Exactly. And what it comes down to is we need to fail in order to succeed.
Right.
And we are families, and whether it's an individual or whoever it might be, we are used to, I hate to say this, but we are used to failing. So it's almost
Right.
a little bit easier when someone closes a door on us or
Right.
opens a door on us. So looking at things differently, again, there's no GPS for this. If you get somewhere and a doctor is not the right fit for you because they're not speaking to the individual, they're speaking to the guardian, maybe you go find somebody else.
Right.
You want to answer your questions. You want them to know that this is the person. And that has happened to us many times. And we have changed providers, we have changed doctors as a result. So knowing that the message that you're providing is, I may not be sitting here someday. You need to get to know this person. You need to know how they react in a situation. Are they, and a lot of times the loved one will guide you easily and say, oh no, this person is not a fit. You might like
Exactly. No, you're exactly right. The person with the disability knows. They know. They're like, this is not
oh,
gonna work. This is not gonna work, and we need to move on. So listen to that, and that's all I'm saying. And your thing about failure is one of my what I always say, because people will be like, "Oh, Donald, you've been so successful," and I'm like, "No, yeah, I mean, I guess, but I've been good at failing and learning from like, oh, that didn't work. Let me adjust. Like, you know, and again, that's why when you see quote unquote success stories, whatever that means, don't be too harsh on yourself if you're listening to this, because people will say things like, "Oh, Donald, you went to law school. It's great. Yeah, but it took a lot of work and I failed a bunch of times to get there." Like, the end product is what you see in the articles that have been done about me, but not the journey. Like, and the journey is the important stuff, and it's basically been just perseverance and so my point is you can do that too as a person with a disability. You're allowed to adjust too, and you're just because if you're listening to this and you're like, my son or daughter, they haven't done much since after school, like, why not start today and start to figure things out? Don't beat yourself up and be like, oh, it's over. It's never too late to start. And the sooner you start, the earlier it is, the easier it is to make some adjustments, you know. Um, so that's what I would just adjust and try things. It's okay. It's okay. I tried baseball too. I sucked at it, so I stopped going. And I found other things I was good at. But I'm glad I tried. I'm glad I tried.
oh, well, they say that you use an experience. Is it a teacher or torture?
Yeah.
So if you're using an experience and it's going to teach you lessons, so be it. If you want it to continue to torture you, it will.
Yeah.
True, true, true.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
And that is why, guys, that is why there are people like Deborah Freed and the consultants at Special Services to teach you things, because I know Isabel and I have been pushing with them to develop something for the alumni, because it's amazing. Where do I turn? You go. I hate it's cliche what I'm about to say, but it's gonna make much sense at the end. The long and winding road. When your kid leaves school, Kyle and I graduated 2020.
Yep.
Had COVID not happened, I would not be sitting here interviewing you, Donald. I would probably be working full time, part time to some aspect. But you see, COVID happened. There's nothing you can do. But don't be afraid to look at someone's strengths and 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 give them an opportunity. And what I'm trying to say is, people are too quick to jump off the break and go, oh, he wouldn't be able to do that. Heck, I'm trying to find something else for me to do, because I don't know how long I'm gonna last at the school, because nothing has moved in 5 years. And I don't want to keep doing the same things over and over again. So don't give up, people.
Yeah, there are always there you always have to be willing to look for new opportunities, and it's okay to feel frustrated sometimes. I mean, that's part of life. So, um, you're right, Jacob. Just keep pushing, and transition, especially during COVID, is a very scary thing because I get it. Schools, their noses to the ground a lot of times, and they're just worried about getting you to that end point of wherever graduation is. And sometimes the transition gets lost in that. Um, and depending on your school too, you have different resources. But in New Jersey, there are good transition resources. You just kind of have to unlock them, and that's where sometimes the gap gets filled because knowing how to unlock them is very hard, and sometimes schools are not as equipped to tell you about them because it's not what they do every day. It's not what they do every day. They are putting out, doing what they got to do to get to the end of the day. It's not easy teaching and doing that stuff. So, I understand that frustration of transition. It took me a while to get to where I needed to go to. So,
And it's important to say that you have succeeded because of the fact that you had a support system that got you there. In that some districts may do more or less. But at the same time, we learn along the way. Jacob's mom is an amazing advocate for him,
right.
but also for other people. And if you learn, each one teach one. We need to say to people, you know, you need to get in there and get this paperwork done.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Because the one thing that I've discovered is that I'm one of those people who does not like to keep secrets, not in general, but about what I learn about the disability community. Because if I learn something, you are darn sure I'm going to post about it or share it in a meeting because I want other people not to be in the dark the way I was. So that's what I think is important. Like Heidi said to me, okay, this is a situation that's happening at school. And I think that Kyle would benefit from it. What if you tried this? And I have done the same thing for other parents. I know that when you open a door for another parent who is already tired, um, you're changing hours and hours of research for them. And why not? Why would you keep that to yourself? And that's the part that I think is frustrating for anybody. So, whether you have a disability or not, what's wrong with sharing what you've learned? I mean, there's nothing wrong with helping another individual. So this is by all means what you're saying. That's how the doors are opened. Teach them this program, try that. This is where you get this funding. I know the same thing happens with DDD. When people get in there, they don't know what to say and they're not
Right.
taught. And Deborah Freed is somebody who works with you guys, and if information, if people are listening, she's somebody who helps people all over. So it's an important aspect of connecting the dots for people's futures and people not to be afraid of asking those questions.
Yeah, and I would say that is really, if you're listening to this and you're just starting the transition process, that's really the key. You need to look for people who've been through it before and find people. And that's what cells are great at. And cells exist nationwide, so you can start there. And, that becomes your foundation because that's where people get stuck. And I always say, I'm very fortunate. My mom was great as well. And but a lot of people don't have those support systems. And that's what cells and places like faces, that's what we kind of become. We become that support system. And if you do have a stronger support system or stronger resources, to me, you have a responsibility to help others because, if not everybody goes to the same good school, not everybody has the same family circumstances. Not everybody has the same family opportunities or family history of diagnoses, access to medical care. I'm very fortunate. So I, not that my life was perfect, but I'm very fortunate to have a mom who fought for me to get what I needed and a family who fought for me to get what I needed. Some people, their moms couldn't fight for them as hard because they were just trying to keep the lights on and keep things going. So, or maybe there was a language barrier, or there could be a million things going on, or their school doesn't even have a transition anything because that school hasn't been adequately funded in decades. So, there are other factors, and like I would say, when Isabel said it's so true, like don't keep secrets. If you're doing something that's working, let people know. If you know about the cell and your other person does it, tell them. Like tell them disability is siloed enough and off enough, which is, you know, or by design to keep us divided, I think a lot of times because it's easier to restrict money that way. But whatever the reason, like we need to fight against that because um it's important that we work together as one community. Because, like I said, there can be some gatekeeping that you have to fight against.
Well, tying into that, and I know Jacob wanted to talk a little bit about this, but advocating. what you're talking about, championing for other people, which is something that you already do. It's inbred in you for what you do. And I know that I saw you speaking in Trenton to stand up for others. And I wanted to hear about that experience. And Jacob and I were just talking about it's something that's very simple. People see that it's a very powerful message, and it shows them that everyone can advocate to restore this line item to the budget.
Yeah, so that's a great point. Speaking up is so important, and advocacy, no matter, is something everybody can do. No matter, even if you're saying, I would never public speak in the history of my life ever in the world. But you are the expert with your disability. If you're receiving services, if you have a disability, you have something that lawmakers and decision makers need to hear. And you know more about this than a lot of them do. So I've realized that as I've gotten older and got a passion, caught the public speaking bug and caught the advocacy bug, and just kind of developed it from there. And like I said, if you are interested in standing up for the line item, we're in the process of all the New Jersey cells are in the process of collecting letters from people saying, don't cut my funding. We have a template so you can call your cell and say, I'm interested. You don't have to be, you can just be a concerned person because you care about people with disabilities. So that's a way to reach out. And you don't have to go speak in Trenton. Not that you can't do that, but that's a way to advocate as well. We at the Center for Independent Living in Atlantic County, we have a statewide um, initiative that came to an end, but we're trying to get it refunded, where we're pushing for civic engagement of all kinds. We're learning about how to advocate, how to build coalitions, how to get involved, because that's really the key to all these decisions. So I would just say keep an eye out on what's going on. And I spoke in Trenton and I enjoyed it, but you don't have to be me to do it. That's all I'm saying. You don't have to be me to do it, nor you can do advocacy without public speaking too. So find what works for you and but be involved, because these decisions in Trenton and Washington, if you have a disability and have a loved one with a disability, they do impact you. They do impact you. So sometimes somebody will say, I'm not interested in being engaged. Well, if you're interested in getting services and getting the help you need, you gotta develop some interest in it because they're making decisions about it. And I'll just lead off with this. People with disabilities are disproportionately impacted by all the issues they discuss in government, whether it's homelessness or climate change or employment or healthcare. We have the unfortunate distinction of having the worst outcomes in all those fields. So if have a disability, you are disprepared. Not only do these decisions that are made by leaders affect you, but they disproportionately affect you. So you really have to engage how you can, whatever that type of engagement is. And Centers for Independent Living and Faces, we can help with that. If you're like, I don't even know where to start, we can help with that. We can help you where to start. And we didn't know where to start either. So it's okay. I didn't like wake up when I was 8 years old and go, let me go speak in Trenton today. That's not how it
Exactly. That's what's so powerful about it. Watching people tell their stories. And I've been using that hashtag on a lot of the posts that I put up recently, hashtag tell your stories, because we need to tell our stories. We need our Congress members to hear what we have to say and stand proud, stand strong. Even as simple as doing a short video, 30 seconds. If it's reading a script that's already been prepared by you, a letter that's already been set up,
correct.
And letting people know that it's making a powerful impact. And I know that the disability community and the senior citizens community very strong into that. I know a lot of people who daily dial the phone and call and speak and leave their messages, speak to an individual and tell them how they feel. And when you have that bug, it develops. I mean, I would know, I was like, gee, I don't know what to say, but like you're saying, speak about how it impacts you, and the passion comes out. So I think it's a beautiful thing. It's a starting point for a lot of people. Even if you just take a letter that's already been preformed and just send.
Yes. And there are organizations that we have a pre-written letter. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you're like making a phone call, oh my God, I hate making phone calls. We can help you with that. There are, and as is, you get better at it. You like, and people are shocked when I say this, but I am actually more introverted than people think, and can be really shy sometimes. So it takes practice. That's all I'm saying. I don't want people to look at somebody speaking at Trenton and go, I could never do that. Like maybe you can, and like don't rule it out. And if you decide that's not my thing, that's fine. But find your thing because people with disabilities are 25% of the population. If we tapped into our true power, you know, leaders have to pay attention to us. That's 25% of the population. 25% of the population. And unfortunately, people with disabilities uh, often are not treated with how they represent the whole community. And our issues get kind of put to the back burner. And that's why being involved is important.
Absolutely.
And that, and that's a and that's a shame because I know I'm Isabel. You know this. I'm down in Ocean City a couple times a month with Mary Mack, and she and I worked together better part of 10 years ago on the radio, and now we're both in the community support idea, just as you said with the seniors. It is amazing to me every time either I come in for a lunch and learn or something like that. Excuse me, and they go, "Oh, I didn't know that existed," or "Wow, where'd that where'd that come from?" And a lot of them are older and they don't may not have family around. So the senior centers may be your only choice of um, togetherness. Maybe that this sounds terrible coming out of my mouth, but I'm going to say it. Uh, that may be the only substantial meal you get during the day. You don't know. You
Exactly.
just don't know.
Right. And that's why I think that both our organizations and SOS were created too, in the first place, to give people with disabilities that sense of community and to break down that isolation because people with disabilities didn't have that until Centers for Independence or formalized to have that. There were people in communities that did it, but again, it's just still a radical concept that disability be taken as just a normal part of nature, and that disability just be seen that way. Because even, senior citizens are part of our community, but oftentimes senior citizens do not identify as having disabilities because of the stigma that can be attached to it. Um,
Oh yeah,
so
yeah.
that's something we face all the time. We've had people with walkers and canes and all kinds of things tell me, oh, I can't apply for you. I won't be acceptable to your services. I don't have a disability. And it's like, well, okay, that's your choice, but but you have a good case to make. You have a good case to make. So it's just that are again the same things that we're fighting against. The senior issues are disability issues, and there's plenty of people back to autism as well in that senior citizen community that have autism or have any type of neurodiversity that just it never got diagnosed, and it was just that was so you know, we so that is what we're constantly having people see that you are part of this community, that these issues are important to you, that cells do matter. Because if you ever, cells help people transition out of nursing homes. So if you're older and you don't want to go in a nursing home, having a cell's a good thing. So just seeing that connection is important, but I understand why it's hard because it's easy for me to say it. I grew up in the 90s, but like the 90s were not perfect, but they were way different than the 60s or the 50s or the 40s. So people are a product of what they've been around. And I get that. I do. I do. If you've only seen autism, or if you hear the word neurodiversity and you don't even know what anyone's talking about,
Then you know how old they are.
Yeah, very,
what,
very true.
what is neurodiversity? And like, because even in the 90s, like I always tell the story because I was born in 1990s, even the concept of disability pride, like that didn't come up I didn't see that.
Oh God,
I
no.
was like disability pride. And like I know it was out there now knowing the history, but like I was just Donald. I didn't run around going like disability pride. Now I would do, but but it takes a while to learn those things, and not everybody does.
Ooh,
Now we.
I like the idea, Jacob. I'm sorry. Keep jumping on you. I like the idea of maybe you talking to the seniors about a
Yeah.
topic and advocating, saying, "Hey, could you do me a favor? Could you do a letter writing campaign? Could you make a phone call for me? Could you?" Because they feel needed, they feel part of your community, and they're advocating for you, adding voice so that people know because they're voters. Maybe it's as simple as getting them
Oh
to.
yeah. And senior citizens are great voters. Senior citizens show up. Senior citizens
Oh yeah, and they're not afraid to back
they don't
down.
miss an election, senior
They're
citizens.
not afraid to back down either.
No, they're not. They're not. So, but it's just key, and I think that's what that's the message we all try to give people is that disability is really one community, and it's not about the autism community or the still. I mean, yes, we all have issues that we care about that are individualized in some way, but it's all different. It's all going towards the same path, which is that people with disabilities and their loved ones should be able to make the decisions that they think are best. So, which everybody says they believe, but then it's not quite delivered all the time. Because I'm always interested in that. Oh, Don, I'm totally with you. Then I get into some rooms and it's like, well, I'm not sure if I'll go that far. So the struggle is real, and that's why organizations like us exist.
Um, Donald, we wanted to thank you very
Well,
much for a very in-depth discussion this morning. If anyone should need to get in contact with you, how
yeah,
would
so the sales number, I'll give you the sales number, and we can is 609-748-2253, and you can hit extension 5. You can find our website just by Googling Atlantic Center for Independent Living. We pop right up. We're on Facebook, on Instagram. We are all over the place. I have a podcast too, which I need to get Isabel on as well. I've had Jacob on. I need to get Isabel on. So called the Atlantic Still Podcast, where we discuss all kinds of disability issues, everything going on disability wise. So if you're interested in that, and I just want to put out a plug. If you're sitting there, you're like, I don't know what to do. Just get involved in something. Get involved. There's so many great organizations. If you're sitting there and you're listening to this and you are in Alaska, which you'd be surprised when people listen, check out You're Still in Alaska, and they may have some resources and some ways for you to get involved, because that stuff is really important. Being involved, building your community, and there is a big disability community out there. So maybe you just got done school, high school, and you're on that transition cliff, and you feel very alone. I remember feeling that way too. Like, what am I gonna do with my life now? Like, what happened? What happens? I just thought you kept going to school. The bus kept coming forever. And but there are things out there. And if you're not in New Jersey, that's okay. There are other things out there as well. But get started somewhere. I'll leave with this. I got my job as director of sales just by it started off as a volunteer position on a board, and then things happen. You meet people, and opportunities open up. But opportunities don't usually come in the form of somebody just knocking on your house randomly. You got to go out there and you got to find out what works for you. They don't usually go, Knock, knock. Hey, Donald, I heard you were looking for something to do today. So that's not how it goes. So find what works for you. But thank you for having me. You guys are awesome, and keep up the great work. Because um, uh, we're on the right side. We have the right mission, and we just got to keep pushing.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Donald, Isabel. Thank you. Look for the next episode soon. Now that it is summertime, you will be seeing more of
Yeah,
these.
more Jacob in your life. You need more Jacob in your
Yeah,
life.
you need more of me in your life. That could be a good thing or a bad thing. You never know. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice afternoon.
All right, bye.